Hey, Garage Gym athletes, before we get to the show, I wanted to check to see if you knew that we are on YouTube. We've been on the platform for a while, but only more recently started to get serious about some video content. So while the podcast will meet most of your needs, some things simply need a visual explanation. So if you want more on concurrent training, programming, garage gyms, head over to YouTube, search Garage Gym Athlete, and subscribe to the channel. I look forward to connecting with you on another platform. All right, let's get to the show. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Garage Gym Athlete Podcast. Jared Moon here with Joe Courtney. What's up, Joe?
How you doing, man? How you feeling?
Good. I was sick for a while, and I feel so much better.
Less sick. Not 100%.
No, I'm better. I'm good. I'm just 99% better. It's very odd. I don't get sick very often.
Kids, man, like same here. I'd have like once a year sickness, and then now it's like every 6 to 8 weeks I'm getting some sort of, like, it's not like a big sickness, but I'd still have like sore throat, stuffy nose. It's like, thanks, kid.
Yeah, I would dodge them. It'd be funny because like it'd go through all three kids. Emily would get it, and I'd somehow miss it. And I was like, yes, I have a superior immune system. But this time, Emily didn't get it, and the other four of us got it. So she might have the superior immune system, and she gets the last laugh, as is the case. All right, well, we'll do some more updates towards the end of the podcast. Just give you guys an update on what we're doing and how things are going personally and at Garage Gym Athlete. Today we're talking about sleep. Pretty interesting study. So the title of the study is Sustained Sleep Restriction Reduces Resistance Exercise Quality and Quantity in females. So this is specific to females. It was done in 2022, I believe. Yeah, 2022. And just overall, a really interesting study. So they were looking at sleep deprivation, right? And they did, I think it was 9. Here, I'll just kind of read this. Participants completed 2 trials, one with normal sleep, 7 hours in bed, one with sleep restriction, which was 5 hours, in randomized order with resistance training sessions during each trial. And they found restriction did not significantly impact training readiness, but led to trivial decrease in volume. And these are some of the things I want to tease out. But ultimately, what they were saying, because it was 9 days, right?
Yes, both of them were 9-day conditions.
Yeah, each condition was 9 days. So they let them sleep roughly 5 hours and then roughly 7 hours, greater than equal to 7 hours. But to be honest, I feel like you could even sleep more. And then they kind of compared them, and it was only 9 days, which I think, doing sleep deprivation for longer than 9 days might be unethical. Like, I know that scientists have to adhere to certain standards and stuff, and I feel like I've heard that before. Like, sleep deprivation is like not allowed past a certain point, especially in human trials. And 4 hours is even decent for some people, right? Like, you could go a lot harder in sleep deprivation with like not letting people sleep at all for 48 hours. But anyway,
That was my first thought when I heard sleep deprivation, and like, I bet you some people were thinking, "Oh, 5 hours. Wait, that's kind of what I do now." So sort of deal. I bet there are people that are like on the 5.5 hours, think they're just fine.
yeah, and that's what should be like an alarm bell for everybody listening, and some of the things that we will tease out. So I have a lot of little things to pick out about this study. Ultimately, just to jump to like the takeaway, because we do kind of have to like think like, okay, what do we think this means for our athletes, and what is the study really saying if we were to like forecast this out a little bit further beyond 9 days? But ultimately, it didn't have a huge effect on volume, which is one thing they were looking at. It was like a 1% difference, which is not huge by any means. I also don't think that matters, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. But where it did seem to matter a lot was they did salivary cortisol, which was increased. Total training distress, which again I'll jump into a little bit more, was more subjective measures, was like huge increase. Perceived exertion was increased. So a lot of the mental things were screwed up. with sleep deprivation. But overall, if we're looking at human beings like robots, which I know scientists like to do, and we like to feel like we are robots sometimes, and we're just looking at exercise volume, that wasn't that big of a difference, which can kind of be the silver lining to all this stuff. But what do you think, Joe, about this study in general?
I like that it was different than what we've seen in sleep before because normally it's like okay they you know most of the ones that we've come across was like they increased somebody's sleep and then the increase of sleep increased their performance in whatever they're doing, but it's more of an acute thing, whereas this one looked at a 9-day stretch and taking away sleep and how it affected it going worse and worse as it went on. And it was interesting. I was kind of surprised that like not all of the markers really took that much of a hit, but there were a couple of them that did make big ones. And the fact that the further you go with losing sleep, the further the more of an impact it's going to have. Which I mean, it should be common sense. But so 1 or 2 nights of bad sleep, like yeah, you're going to feel bad, but it's more of a subjective pushing through it kind of thing, to a certain degree. But like after, new baby, 2 3 weeks or whatever of crap sleep, you're gonna really it's like everything is gonna start to take a hit. And then as I saw, your cortisol is gonna be way high, which is not good. And that's when you need to kind of think about altering what you do a little bit to sort of if you're just really stuck in a bad sleep situation like with the baby, you can't do anything about that. Or so if you can't fix your sleep habit, then that's when you start to take the study and look into okay, how can I shape my workouts because I know it's the sleep is being affected, and how can I kind of balance that out.
Yeah. Um, and I think when you're going through this, any kind of phase where you're not able to get a lot of sleep. So we're talking about 5 hours here was the sleep restriction again, just hitting that again. It was like slightly, it was like 4.75 something, the official number. And as you mentioned, Joe, a lot of people listening to this podcast, that might be their normal. Like we're not talking about, hey, what happened to your exercise performance when you didn't sleep for 48 hours or you only got 2 hours of sleep. This is like averaging 5 hours. This could be very normal for a lot of people. And overall, the volume in the sleep restriction state was not that much different. And I think that makes perfect sense because if you have achieved a certain level of fitness, you're not going to lose it over the course of 9 days. It's so the fact that there's only a 1% difference, I think that it's almost irrelevant to the study. And so you're not. I don't think that should be the expectation. I do think over a longer time period, if you compounded this over a couple of months, you would probably see actual volume go down because all of the subjective measures were decreased. And another thing to hit on was they measured velocity per set, and it was slower for the sleep restriction people. Um, for the lower body, it was 15% slower, up to 15% slower. And we know, and that's why I'm like, I'm not just saying, yeah, if you compound this over time, it'll get worse. Like, I'm just actually looking at it. I'm like, okay, if you can't move weight as quickly, we've talked about this a lot, like dynamic efforts, you're losing the ability to be explosive by 15% because of this sleep restriction or you're not sleeping enough. I think that's significant. That's going to play into you not being able to develop as much power. If you cannot develop power, you are not strong. And so you can put in the volume and check all the boxes, but how you do fitness actually does matter. Checking all the boxes is great for maintaining consistency, burning some calories, getting movement in. But when we're talking about moving performance metrics forward, all the subjective stuff in here matters. So on the objective, you're actually getting slower. You're not able to move weight as quickly. This didn't translate into the upper body compound lifts. They were able to maintain relatively the same speed. But again, I mean, there's just not a lot to the upper body. Like, I've never had an upper body day where I'm like, God, that just crushed me. That's always leg day, right? That's like leg day deadlift. Those are the ones that do that.
Hmm.
But if we look at all these other things that I kind of mentioned, um, let's see, the cortisol increased by 42%. So that's stress hormone. Overall, not good. I think compounding that would be bad. I'm not going to pretend like I'm a hormonal expert, but I think we all know having a constantly elevated cortisol levels is not a good thing if it's not managed correctly throughout the rest of your day. And then training to stress was another thing, increased by 84%. Okay, so let's talk about what training to stress was a little bit. This was they used a questionnaire for it, and it looks like it was perception of depression. So how depressed are you? Their own perception. How sore are you? What's your fatigue level? And it overall reduced their vigor. So they used a questionnaire to do this, and they found out like they just, whether they're 15% slower, they're 84% worse mentally. Like they're just not able to do that. And again, how you do fitness matters. So if I'm walking into a training session, I'm feeling slightly depressed, I'm not happy. I just feel like I'm fatigued. I feel like I'm more sore from yesterday's training session. The chances of me bringing it to like get to the next level, to like go 1 second faster on an interval or push 5 more pounds on a squat or getting that extra rep, that decreases significantly your ability to do that if your mental status is not there. And so I think that's the biggest part of this sleep restriction study that I thought was interesting was, yeah, we're not robots. And I think that that's what a lot of these sleep studies look at. Like you were saying, Joe, they have, okay, you slept more, you got faster, you slept less, you got slower, or you lifted less. But how do we feel mentally? Like how is our like perception of how we are handling things? And that was significantly worse, which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah, I kind of expected the questionnaires to be that way just because you're just going to feel pretty bad. They tested a lot of things in this,
Mm-hmm.
and that's why I mentioned earlier that like not everything was as affected as I thought it was going to be. So testosterone was tested, and that didn't show much of a significance. But they also tested a bunch of performance, like drop jump and bar and such. And the drop jump, I was surprised that didn't have any effect. So like it's just when you standing on the box and you step off the box and they see the height as to which you I guess depress and see how you go down. That wasn't affected, but the bar speed was significant. And because of the subjective measure being significant, it got me to thinking, okay, what? So, and I guess I'll elaborate and ask you that what you would train when you're in these situations. So you're probably not going to be doing you're not going to be doing dynamic efforts like EMOMs, or you're going to have to lower the weight that you would normally do for those because, like you said, 15% difference. And then as far as subjective measures, a lot of times with like strength endurance, it's going to be a lot about how you're feeling and pushing yourself to that certain window. But if you're already feeling crappy, then that window is going to get smaller and much less. So the volume is going to go down. So you might either have to add an additional set to get the volume because you're not hitting that threshold, or yeah, something like that. So I don't know if if you started thinking about that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at this multiple ways because I I feel like something that I should hit on kind of bigger picture is I kind of was talking about, okay, check the box, get the volume in, those kind of things. But if you are not pushing yourself occasionally, okay, you don't have to do this every single day, but there is a hormonal response, increase in testosterone, growth hormone from training, and it can vary wildly based off of how hard your training was. So, to put it plainly, the harder you train, the better of a response that you're going to get. That doesn't mean that you want to train hard every day. Don't be like, oh, cool, higher testosterone. I'm going to train as hard as I can every single day, because it can actually start to work in reverse if you're not recovering and all this other stuff. So that's the case I'm making for you. Want to train hard. You want to push yourself. You don't always want to be in check a box fitness. Like I did it. Like, and because it doesn't matter like this for your overall health, you need to occasionally go hard. Okay. So that's just something that you need to note. But you might be in time frames of your life, like with a new baby. I've been in that situation 3 times. None of my kids slept well, and it definitely affected my sleep. And so during those times, yeah, you have to be very mindful about like what goals you're chasing and what you're going for. And for me, I kind of just get comfortable with the fact that I'm going to check a box fitness style. Like that's it. That's what's going to happen in this sleep deprived state. But then if there's like a random one off day, baby slept great, which I don't have babies anymore, to be honest. So like I'm not really in this situation anymore. I sleep great all the time, for the most part. But when I was in that situation, um, and I had, baby slept great, I got a lot of sleep. That might be the time for like a meet yourself Saturday or a harder lifting session or something, just to get in there like at least once a week, once a month, to maintain that. Because if training hard, whatever your frequency is, if that's once a week or once a month or a couple times a month, if you lose that muscle, it's hard to get back. And I mean that from a mental standpoint. It's hard to regain that pushing yourself muscle if you stop doing it altogether. Like if all you want to do is go through the motions of strength training in zone 2, that's great. Those things are great for you, but you're going to be losing out on kind of what I was talking about, like the true potential benefits of what fitness could be. So you need to still push yourself. You need to find time to do that. And so that's, to your point, like what kind of programming should you pursue? Well, if it's going to be a long duration of not being able to sleep, I would just go through the motions. If it's just occasional, like you had a really bad night of sleep last night and you are wanting to like maximize things, then shift your days around. Yeah, let's move anything that's speed related, dynamic effort related. Let's move that to a different day. Let's move our easy aerobic day to today, and just move your calendar around based off sleep. And some people travel cross country, right? So like your circadian rhythm can get jacked up, and you might be losing sleep. Factor those things into with what kind of training session you're doing today, because you could just take the mindset of, I'm just going to be tough, push through it. I'm going to do it no matter what. But I mean, science isn't really backing you up here. It might just be easier to move these days around as opposed to just act like you're super tough and you're going to get it done anyway. You're still going to do the training, just move the days around and shift it to where when you have good sleep or bad sleep. But unfortunately, I think 5 hours might be a lot of the people listening to this. That might be their average.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was going to go over next, was shifting days around. And since a lot of these measures are like the subjective is a big thing that was a hit, and then like we said, velocity and whatnot. Moving the days around is big. I do that all the time, even now, and it might come down to whatever day of the week you might wake up and you feel the best of the worst, if that makes sense. Like there's going to be some days where you're just going to feel less good than you would, but there might be a day where it's like, okay, I feel fine. I might have only gotten 5.5 hours of sleep, but I feel okay. That might be a day that you do that thing that you might need to push it on, whether it's squats, whether it's something velocity based. And I move my days all around all the time. I make sure that my squat day is a day that I'm feeling the best that I think I could, because there's just so much involved to it. There's so much weight to it. But like press day, I can do press day like sleep deprived no matter what, because press doesn't take that much out of me. Press, I don't feel like I also don't feel like I'm going to hurt myself doing a press or upper body workout.
Yeah.
So things to know about that is, that's one way you could use this if you like, obviously fix your sleep, but if you're in a situation with that you just can't do it, then moving the days around and being more tactical about how you do things. If it is a velocity or power day, you might need to go down a little bit on the weight just so you're really getting powerful, and not just, think about the power stimulus instead of the actual weight that you're moving. Um, and then lastly, one of the things that I kind of wish they if they could measure one more thing, I wish they did, and that would be mitochondria. And that's because of how much it ties with sleep. And then the fact that in the past we've talked about how zone 2 improves your mitochondrial function, and how much um that affects sleep as well. Like mitochondria ties to sleep a lot, from what I've just quick searching around. So adding some zone 2 work could at least improve the quality you might be getting for your less hours of sleep, and at least zone 2 work has a lot of great benefits in general. But that could just be another thing that you could do on some of your crappier days, but you still, as you said before, still find time to kind of push it at least once during the week on a better feeling day.
Yeah. I think, and if you are the person who's only getting 5 hours of sleep, just sleep more. Like, I think that's a great takeaway here. I've been in that camp, but then I just decided sleep was important and I was going to get more of it. And I think that it's something everyone needs to focus on to some degree. I think that if you think that you're okay, you might be. You might be. There are some studies showing that some people can get less sleep and be perfectly fine. But aside from doing a bunch of blood tests and like trying to find out if that's you or genetic testing, um, you could just sleep more for like a month, try and prioritize it, and just subjectively see how you're feeling. Because the biggest change for me when I started sleeping more, going from a guy who was like, 5, 6 hours to really 7, 8 hours now, I'd say 4 to 6 back in the day to, yeah, 7 to 8. Um, the biggest thing that I noticed was my lack of fatigue. I didn't get like this new boost of energy, and I was like, "Oh yeah, like I feel like I'm a superhuman now, and my training sessions like are so much different." That's not actually what I noticed. I just noticed I don't really get tired when I sleep enough. Like I get to the end of my day, and I'm like, I guess I'll go to sleep. I don't feel like exhausted unless it was like a really hard, taxing day or stressful day or something like that. But most of the time, that's been the biggest thing that I noticed. But other than that, there wasn't much more. But I used to be not that way. I used to get to the end of my day and I'd be like, just done. Like I was like a zombie around dinner time with the kids. And then it was just like ready for bed after that. And so everyone's going to notice something a little bit different. Some people might notice immediate performance increase because other things that we've looked at is like this, it's in here. It's like the subjective measure of fitness, but I've looked at a ton of sleep studies that say the same thing. Like people, they'll sleep deprive them for like a day or two, and then they'll have them do an interval. They put out less work, and it's always mentally. They feel more fatigued. Like even if they're not, they're measuring everything else. Like you're putting out the same amount of power, whatever. It feels so much more draining when you have had less sleep. Now let's take that and translate it into the rest of your life. When you have stressors in work or stressors in a relationship or stressors just in traffic, even, like wherever you're at, whatever the stressor is for you, think about your perception of that stress based off of what the science is saying. The science is saying when you sleep less, you perceive everything as sucking a little bit more. And we're just talking about the training element. If we get outside of training, there are a lot more stressful elements in our lives that are outside of training that you might perceive a little bit harsher than it could be in reality if you just had an extra hour or two of sleep. So I think that that's another reason why, beyond recovery, beyond speed workouts, beyond, the ability to push it a little bit harder, I think your life will just be better if you are not overly tired, fatigued, sleep deprived.
Yeah. I remember the first like 2 months after Landa was born, my training was actually still really good. Like sleep, I was still, sleep wasn't great, but I was still getting it, and it was fine. But after like 2 months, I noticed not only, um,
Your sleep tank was
energy.
emptying. Yeah.
Yeah, basically. Because we had been such great sleep for the longest time, but I guess after a while you just kind of lose it after a while. And yeah, ever since then, like I've definitely been having a hard time pushing myself to go hard on certain workouts and find that intensity. And honestly, it is kind of funny timing because the last couple of weeks I've been trying to think of ways to do workouts where I could I could really engineer, like force myself to go to those higher intensities. Whether it's okay, I'm going to go and do 3 to 5 minute run intervals, and really try and get into that mid to high 80% heart rate range, because if I just go out to the gym and do a workout, I'm not really hitting that anymore. And it's definitely been harder to find that gear in this past year than it has in the past. And yeah, sleep has definitely been a factor because it's just not been great.
Yeah, and like I said, I've been in that situation multiple times, and I do think it all like works itself out over time, right? Like you're not, as long as you're still training, you're going to be fine. And then once sleep gets back to normal, you're able to like push it harder, and you're like, oh, I got some of that motivation back. It's like, oh, it was just sleep deprivation. But yeah, people are resilient. That's another thing. So like it took you a while for that sleep fatigue, like that sleep deprivation to like work its way into your life. And I think that's what happens. And you said a couple months, which is interesting. So they they were only looking at 9 days here, right, of sleep deprivation, and there's only that 1% loss, and we talked about all the other studies, but like, man, you compound that into months, I guarantee there's going to be a lot more loss of volume, and all those other things are going to get a lot worse too. The training distress factors that they're talking about. Now, what can you do? Like, what would I do? Like I said, check a box fitness. So if you're following our programming or a program in general, just make sure you do the program. Like, I think that was my biggest thing after Eleanor was born. I was just like, I'm not going to miss any days. That was like the only goal I made for myself is like, I will not miss no matter what happens the night before. I will not miss any days. And I stuck to it for the full cycle after she was born and then, continued. But like it was odd. She was like, it was really cool because she was born like in a fit week for us. And then like that next week was the start of a new cycle. And so that I was like, this is perfect. Like her first week of life is like the start of a new garage gym athlete cycle. So I'm just gonna see my goal over the next 12 weeks is not miss any training sessions. And I actually did pretty well with that. And I think it wasn't I'm going to try and push myself as hard as I can every training session or even once a week. Like it was when I could, I would, but ultimately it was just, I'm not going to miss any training sessions no matter what. And I lost no fitness. Like I was in great shape at the end of that. So I do think consistency, getting enough volume, and I think that's where studies like this are a little bit odd because it's outside of our programming. Like the last couple studies we've looked at where they're like, how much volume was there for us? Unless you're changing a percentage of your own, like you should get the same amount of volume. Like if I'm programming for you and I've said, here's what we're squatting this week, and you do the programming, you got the volume, and there's no additional volume to be had. You know what I mean? Like that's what they're looking at in these studies. They're like, can you do more? Like all that stuff. We're not doing that. We have just the prescribed workout. So long as you do it, you're getting the volume. There's not going to be this lesser volume unless you quit a set or you back the weight down from what it should have been, which is also fine if you're feeling fatigued. But we have a fixed training program, so there shouldn't be a variation in volume unless you're making that decision on your own. And so just check the box, get it all done. If you do need to back down on weights, that's fine. But ultimately, I don't think it'll be necessary.
Yeah, I'd say this is actually something I did recently as well. Change your training max. That might help as well, big time. Depending on how recent you have maxed out, but it could at least put you on a better
What is a training
level
max,
of where you
Joe?
should.
Just for anybody
True.
who might not know.
You take your training max. So for your training max, you take your max, your 1 rep max or your true max, and you take 90% of that or 10% off, whatever you want to do that. And that 90% is what your percent is going to be based off of for your lift. So if we're lifting 75%, you're taking 75% of 90% of your training max. So I just did this past week because I'm just getting back into squatting. So for one, it's just I need to be warmed up to it, and also all the sleep stuff. My true max is 405, and so I went and changed my training max to 365 because that's 90% of 405. So now all of my percentage lift are based off of my training max, and it definitely made a difference squatting yesterday.
Yeah, and I've basically always operated off of training maxes. Very rarely do I operate off of my one true rep max because, to be honest, uh, the training is just too hard when I do that. I think maybe because I have like a good 1 rep max potential, I'm good for it that day, right? Like I'm like, okay, today's max out day, max out. Like, so I get a decent max, a decent test or whatever. But then in training for the next 12 weeks, I'm like, this feels really heavy, And so all these other days, like, I think training max is just good for the longevity of an athlete, and I think most of our athletes should be operating off of a training max once you start to kind of hit a peak. I don't know if it's necessary when you're like coming up and you're seeing gains really fast, but like after a certain point, you're like, okay, I'm not chasing like a new back squat every 12 weeks. Like, what am I going to do? Well, get your back squat, keep your training max. And to be honest, you'll realize that you're not going to fluctuate much on your actual one true max, even if you go down to a training max.
Yeah, it's good. I don't do that from my press though, because it's press.
Yeah, it's we've been trashing the upper body this podcast.
Yeah.
What are you doing, upper body? Why can't you lift like our legs can?
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I think that's about it, man. We kind of hit most everything. Anything else you want to say on sleep or the study in general?
I don't think so. I think we're pretty good. We kind of exhausted everything.
Have you heard of ChatGPT?
Maybe
The AI
no.
software?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I think you mentioned it once or twice, but I haven't done it. Oh
So if anybody's listening hasn't checked it out, like, we've been playing around with it for the last I don't know. I've been playing around with it for probably like a month or two. So ChatGPT is this artificial intelligence software, and I was trying to find out if it could replace me as a fitness programmer. So like I'll go in there, I'll be like, give me a workout, this, that, and the other. It's idiot, doesn't know anything. No, like it could give you can say like, give me a workout, and it'll give you a workout. But then I tried to like go specifically to like our style of programming. I'd be like, give me glycolytic intervals for today. And it's still like, it thinks it's giving me glycolytic, but I was like, your work to rest ratios are off. And then I was like, give me a speed strength workout. And it was like, I think it was trying to give me a combination of speed and strength. So not quite smart enough to replace us yet, but who knows, it might get there. But interestingly, I said, I took a summary of this study and I put it in Chat GPT, and I said, give me a summary of this study that would appeal to millennials. And here's what it said. Yeah, I tried to make it like so humorous and would appeal to millennials. And it says, looks like pulling all-nighters for that deadline isn't just bad for your grades, it's also bad for your gains. A recent study found that sleep deprivation can make even the most manageable workout feel like a nightmare. So next time you're tempted to sacrifice sleep for Netflix binges, remember, gains before streams. Hashtag. That was it. Gains before streams is a hashtag.
Gains before streams.
Gains before streams. And
I love that they hashtagged it.
Yeah, artificial intelligence is pretty crazy. And then I did the same thing, and I said, all right, give me a summary of this that's humorous and would appeal to boomers.
Oh my God.
And it says, looks like sleep deprivation is the ultimate workout killer. Not only will it make you feel like a grumpy grandparent, but it will also make your gym session feel like a walk in the park for a senior citizen. So if you want to crush your workout and avoid feeling like a walking zombie, make sure to get your beauty sleep, or else you'll be lifting weights like a weakling. No hashtags. No hashtags for boomers.
Weakling is that's definitely it. That's awesome. I'm gonna need that screenshot of that second one.
Yeah, so this is pretty fun stuff. I might just start making this a segment on the podcast. Be like, okay, what does artificial intelligence? How does artificial intelligence summarize this study? But also, I'm not going to dive into AI right now, but it is really cool stuff, like what it's able to do and things that you can play with and everything else. But I wanted to get that out there. But let's get into the Meet Yourself Saturday for the week, and then we'll get out of here. So the workout this week is Confused 2K. So it's 10 rounds for time of 200-meter row or run. And then you will do a front rack barbell hold for the duration of the 200-meter time. So you would go do a 200-meter run or row, and then you would, if that took you a minute, you would then hold the front rack barbell hold for 1 minute, just standing. If you're a competitor, you'd be at your body weight. If you're established, the weight on the bar would be 65 to 75% of your body weight. And if you're a recruit, you can do 45 to 65% of your body weight or less. So you could also just do this with kettlebells if you want, if you have two kettlebells of the same weight, or you can do it with the barbell. But overall, this is a really tough one. Makes it hard to breathe. Overall, what tips do you have, Joe?
Selecting an appropriate front rack hold that you can hold safely with form for the for the duration of your 200-meter row.
As time goes on. So like factor in like a training max buffer there, if you will.
Yeah. So 200-meter row, that's like, I don't know, a minute. I'm not even
Yeah.
sure how long.
250,
Yeah.
like if you're doing like a 2 minute on the rower, for like us, that's not crazy fast.
Yeah.
So half, like 2 minute per 500 meters. So half of that would be 250 meters for like a minute. Still wouldn't be that fast. So if you're trying to go fast, I would say, I'm not trying to give anybody, you do your own splits, but like sub one
Yeah.
minute on the rower, and then you're hopping over to a barbell. So your front rack holds are going to be anywhere from like 40 minutes to a minute and a half, depending on
Yeah.
fitness level.
So not many people should be at competitor body weight. Even the established is going to be hard. I know in strength track, I program front rack holds, and they're usually 60-second front rack holds. So you might already somewhat know of a weight, but 10 of them is a lot different than 3 or 4 sets of them. So they will decline over time. So I guess row really fast, so you don't have to hold as long. As long as
There
you
you
can
go.
get through as
That's
long
what's
as you can
awesome
get through the
about this
breathing.
workout. Is like you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. If you want to go slow on the intervals, that's fine. You're holding a lot longer. If you want to go fast, you're going to be out of breath, hop into the bar, but you won't have to hold as long. So that's what makes this a Meet Yourself Saturday is you kind of have to game this in your brain. You could change it every set. You could do a long set and a short set. And you might be like, wow, I really hate front rack holds, so I want to go faster. You can make that decision in the workout and go do that. Play mental chess with yourself and see who wins, the weaker version of yourself or the stronger version. And one thing that we always hit on in this one, especially because you're just standing there with the weight in the front rack position, do not lock out your knees. Okay, so you can pass out if you lock out your knees. So just avoid that like the plague, and you will be good to go. All right, anything on that?
No.
Cool. Well, we will get out of here. Thanks everybody for listening to the Garage Gym Athlete podcast. All of our current athletes, we really do appreciate you sticking around for the programming, for the podcast, leaving us reviews, 5-star reviews, and positive comment. It really does help the show out on the podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, like this video, leave us a comment so we can know what you like, what you don't like. And if you are interested in joining Garage Gym Athlete as an athlete, so you can get that prescribed programming, not have to worry about this stuff, go to garagegymathlete.com, sign up for a free trial, and get started today. But that's it for this one. Remember, if you don't kill comfort, comfort will kill you.